We have been looking into the basic teachings of God's Word relative to how a Christian is supposed to approach life, how we're supposed to treat one another, how we're supposed to treat the world around us. When I say one another, I don't mean believer treating believer. We talked about that. When Jesus said, "This is my commandment, that ye love one another," he was not speaking that the church should love the church, because the Lord himself said, if you love those that love you, he said, well, even the heathen does that. So we know that's not what the Lord was saying. He was saying, as human beings, we ought to love one another. And the world will tell that we are his disciples by the simple fact that we have love for our fellow human being, period. Not just love for others within the church. We talked about that last week. Now, my allergies are really trying to kick me around. I've been trying desperately to avoid mowing the lawn this week, because I know that I wear a mask. I wear a surgical mask when I do it. But every time I do it, at least I wind up just tortured. You know, my allergies, even with the mask on, I still wind up with horrible, horrible reactions. Amen. All right. This week we want to move a little bit further into the concept of not just life and how we should live our lives. You know, we looked at a few passages that surmise the basic rule of thumb for believers. Treat others as you wish to be treated, and love your neighbor as you love yourself, which of course we talked about. You got to have some sort of love for yourself if you're going to be able to love anybody else. And the biggest problem in our world is Satan goes out of his way to affect us in our youth in such a way that we grow up and we mature into people who have issues with ourselves. And one of the things that God tries to do when he establishes his parental relationship with us is to restore much to us that we may not have had growing up. He wants us to have joy. He wants us to have peace. He wants us to be able to think well of ourselves and not have a negative self-image and not have negative self-esteem. And a relationship with the Lord is able to bring all these positive things into our life, which in turn helps us to put positive things out. But we wonder why. You know, I've seen people who were some of the most miserable human beings on the planet. I mean, really awful, terrible people. They come to God, they find a relationship with the Lord, and then all of a sudden, their whole personality changes. Everything changes. Well, of course it does. Because now they're putting in something different than they were having put in when they were growing up as a child, you know. I had a man at the Riverside Church of God who his wife said at his funeral that he adopted me as his son. He had 5 daughters. He never had a son. Brother Sensible. I loved this man. He was a precious, precious man of God. And Brother Sensible, when I met him at Riverside Church of God, I didn't know his history. I didn't know his story. But he kind of took me under his wing, and he'd invite me over to his house to do little odd jobs, and he'd want to pay me, and I didn't want to take any money. His wife and he were older, and I was happy to help them, you know. But he'd buy me things like he'd go to a thrift shop, and he'd see a pair of boots, cowboy boots he thought I liked, so he bought them for me. What he didn't know is they were about a size too small. And they hurt my feet every time I wore them. But I'm going to tell you something, I wore them because I wanted Brother Sensible to see me in those boots. And but he was such a sweet old man, you'd have never known had he not told you that he had spent something like near 14 years in prison for murder. He was at one time in his life for many, many years a raging, angry drunk. And he used to chase his wife around the house, literally, folks, with a meat cleaver. When he would get drunk and angry, he would grab a knife and start chasing his wife, and she'd have to lock herself in the bedroom of the house, and he would just be out there raging and scare his daughters to death. All of his children were scared to death of him. Well, one day he was out in the yard. This is his own testimony. He was out in front of his house working on a vehicle, and some neighbor come over and started making a fuss with him about something. And Brother Sensible went in the house and grabbed a knife and came out and killed him. And he wound up going to prison. Now, they didn't arrest him for first-degree murder because he did not, plan this. This was an act of rage, a crime of passion, as they say. And so he was not charged with first-degree murder, but somewhere along the line, he wound up getting a sentence that eventually he could get out on parole if conditions were right. Part of it, I guess, being he was as old as he was. When this happened, I believe he was already in his, late 50s or thereabouts. Well, Brother Sensible told me, he said, Chuck, I spent, and he literally could tell you the number of years, the number of months, the number of weeks, the number of days, the number of hours. He literally could tell you right down to the hour how many hours he had spent in that prison. And he said, I went up for parole 5 times. And every time I went up for parole, my wife would come visit me in prison and she'd say, Freeman, we're praying that God gets you out of here. He said, I'd go back to my cell and I'd say, why? Is that woman out of her mind? Why is she praying that God gets me out of here? Why would she even pray that? She's terrified of me. I've tormented her whole married life. Why would she want me to get out of prison? But she always treated him as though she still loved him. She still cared about him. In today's world, God forgive me, but a lot of women would have run out and got a divorce as quick as they could, but she said, we're praying for you. We're praying for you. And finally, he said, every time I went up for parole, the parole board would say to me, you're an angry old man, and you will die in prison. We see nothing has changed in you. Nothing has been accomplished in you, and you will not get out of this jail. He said, I was going up, I believe it was for about the 6th time, to go before the parole board. He said, and my wife told me again that she was praying for me. And he said, I went back to my cell. He said, and Chuck, for the first time in my life, I decided it might be time to talk with the man upstairs. He said, and I said, Lord, my wife has been serving you in this little Pentecostal church for a lot of years. And she keeps telling me that she's praying for me, and my children are praying for me, and that church is praying for me. He said, well, if you will get me out of this prison, I will serve you till the day I die. He said, the day that I get out of this jail, I will go to the church and I will dedicate, because he had visited enough to know, he said, I will dedicate my life to you. He went before the parole board. They did what they do. All of a sudden, they said, Mr. Sensible, we sense that something has changed in you. We feel like there's been a pretty major shift in you. They said, we are going to give you a chance, and we are going to grant you parole. But mind you, one single act, and you're right back in jail again. You'll be in prison the rest of your life. His wife came to pick him up on a Friday morning. Riverside had a long tradition for many decades. They had a Friday morning prayer meeting. Brother Sensible got out of the jail, and he said to his wife, "Were you going to go to prayer meeting today?" Like she always did. And she said, "Well, I was, but I had to come pick you up." He said, "Well, then drive straight to the church." He meant what he said. He said, "Drive straight to the church." She did. He went down to that altar, and the women, from most of the attendees of the Friday morning prayer meeting were women, and the women ran the meeting because, you got to remember, this goes back many decades, so primarily it was housewives who didn't work and that sort of thing. He went down to that altar, and the ladies from that church got around him, and he prayed through to an experience with God. And I'm going to tell you something, folks. You never met a more gentle, more compassionate, more loving human being than Freeman Sensible. I'm telling you, God is able to provide things that you may not have ever found in your life up until this very moment. And when God provides those things, you finally can learn to love yourself. You finally can learn to be happy in yourself. And there are such benefits to a relationship and a walk with God. And I wish people would understand this. People who are so anti-religion and all, they just don't understand. That walk with God, you can call it fiction all you want to, but it changed a murderer into one of the most gentle, sweetest, kindest men that I've ever known in my life. And I doubt he could have accomplished that, Lisa, by simply waking up one morning and saying, "I think from now on I'm going to be gentle and sweet and kind." No, he found something in that relationship with God that changed his rocky heart and turned it into a heart of flesh. Amen? All right. Now, as human beings, we talked about Maslow's hierarchy of human needs. In the pursuit of happiness, the primary thing that brings happiness to most human beings is finding love and walking in a relationship with another human being. Am I telling the truth? Mm-hmm. If there's anything, people... again, I hate to draw from popular culture, but at the same time, it helps people, I think, to identify with and understand what I'm saying. If you watch the old Roseanne show, you remember when Becky got married to Mark, and at first they went off and lived in Chicago or whatever it was, and then eventually they came back, and they were living in Langford again. And they lived in this little trailer. And I mean, poor Roseanne and Dan, they just looked at that trailer like it was a hellhole. It was just the worst thing in the world they could. But they were happy. They were happy. Why? Because they loved each other. They had found what was most important to them. And whether they lived in a trailer or they lived in a mansion didn't really matter to them. They were happy. I've known many, many couples in my life who may not, Martin, have achieved the highest in regard to income, may not have achieved the highest when it comes to possessions, the kind of house they lived in, the kind of cars they drove, but they were happy. And they were happy because they were satisfied with one another. They were happy to have the love of their life in their life. We just this week have seen an American icon, someone that honestly I hold in very high esteem, Mrs. Barbara Bush. I think Barbara Bush was a marvelous lady. I think she was an incredible human being. I think she was a very generous, kind, sweet-hearted lady. But at the same time, she was tenacious, she was strong, she was a little on the stubborn side, she was opinionated, she was independent. Her husband was president of the United States, but if she disagreed with him on something, she'd say so. She said, "Well, George may hold this position, but I hold this position." You know what I'm saying? She was an independent thinker, a free thinker. I liked Barbara Bush. genuinely, honestly can say today that my heart was broken to hear that she was ill, never mind when I heard she had passed away. Because I know nobody lives forever, but she was just such an incredible person, such an incredible human being. And look at the life she had. 73 years married to the same man. By all accounts, those two were madly in love. Boy, I'll tell you, it sure is a far throw from what we see in the White House these days, isn't it? Somebody's been through marriages like toilet tissue, and I think back, you can say what you want to say about Richard Nixon. I have my own feelings about Nixon. I'm not on the same boat with a lot of negative thinking people where he's concerned. But I'll tell you one thing, I remember when his wife Pat died. Yeah. I remember the images of him standing beside her casket, and his body was literally heaving as he wept. His whole body was just heaving as he wept. His heart was so broken, and he didn't last very long after that. And they had been married a very long time. I don't remember how many years, probably over 50, I imagine, because they both lived to a good age. He didn't last very long after her passing either. I remember the stories about Ron Reagan and Nancy Reagan. There were two people that really loved each other. And it was till death do us part. Wasn't their first marriages. It's their second. But boy, I'll tell you, they found success with that second one. And those were people. Look at Rosalind Carter and Jimmy Carter. We've had some incredible examples of virtue and achievement in relationships in the White House, haven't we? What a sad pile of mess we've come to today. But we've had some incredible examples of people that really loved each other. And when you look at these people, they not only loved each other, but they had attributes within them that were admirable, that you could appreciate. They were compassionate people. They were people who had a heart for other human beings. They were people of great faith. Whether you agree with their specific doctrine or not, they were people of great faith. And so when we see relationships like that, how many of us don't envy them? How many of us see an article online about George Bush and Barbara Bush being married 73 years, and we think, oh my, wouldn't it be wonderful to find someone that you could love and care about so much that you could literally spend an entire lifetime, even if you live to be quite old. Now, for me to make 73 years with Tommy, I'd have to live to be about 108, because I didn't come into this thing till I was about 35 or thereabouts. But what a wonderful thing it is. When you see that kind of achievement and accomplishment, it does stir up a certain amount of envy, It really is something. Why? Because love and relationship is something that is very, very, very high on the human pyramid. Something that we seek, is something that we need. I constantly read online, people write about dating and, all I find are dogs, all I find are bad people. I was in a relationship for so many months and found out he was just a dog, and blah, blah, blah. And I read these things all the time, and there's so much negativity about relationships. And I've got news for you, folks. If you think that this negative attitude about relationships is owned by LGBT people, then you must not pay very good attention. No, women complain about it all the time. They have the same complaints in the heterosexual world that people have in the LGBT world. It is no different. Let me tell you a little secret about relationships. relationships between two human beings, and they basically encompass all the same dynamics. They really do. They encompass the same dynamics regardless of the gender of the two people. Whether it is a LGBT relationship or whether it is a heterosexual relationship, it really doesn't matter. The rules are the same. So everything that I'm going to talk about for the next few weeks, however long we go with it, is universal in its application. I want to start out by trying to help the listener. Hopefully somebody a little younger than us is watching some of us we're so closer to the grave than we are the starting line. It probably don't matter what I'm saying right now. But I want to start out tonight by helping you understand. I've told you before, I do not believe the Bible speaks to every single solitary issue that has ever approached humankind. I don't believe for a minute it has. It would be volumes thick if it did. Okay? It doesn't talk about dating. It doesn't talk about engagement. You know, people say, well, yes, but, you know, it has examples. Yeah, it has examples of things. But it doesn't tell us how we should go about all these things per se. But the rules that apply to how we live our lives also are construed to apply to how we date and how we behave ourselves in terms of interpersonal relationships. Really? You mean to tell me that the same rules that I'm to live by, love my neighbor as myself, do unto others as I would have them do unto me, those same rules apply to dating and relationships? Exactly. They sure do. If you wouldn't want somebody to treat you a certain way when it comes to dating, Martin, then don't you dare do people that way. Well, I wouldn't want to be used as a piece of meat. I wouldn't want to be somebody's one-night stand, and I wouldn't want somebody to lie to me just to get me into bed. I'm going to talk plain tonight, all right? I wouldn't want somebody to tell me what they think I want to hear and to make me believe one thing when really something very different is going on, just so they could get their jollies, you know. Well, then why are you doing it? Well, because it's different when you're the doer than when you're the receiver. It sure is. But understanding how it feels when you're on the receiving end should prevent you from doing it. Because when you do it, you're visiting that same negative feeling that you get upon the person you're doing it to. So yes, the same basic rules apply. But I want to tell you, I've come to a point in my life where I realize that the biggest problem with relationships in our world today is that most people are completely oblivious as to any process they should follow in trying to find and achieve a committed, monogamous, lifelong relationship. The biggest mistake most people make, Martin, is not a mistake they make 6 months into the relationship or a year into the relationship. The biggest mistake they make is right up front. It's right off the starting line. It's how they shop for one.
Right. Yeah.
Now, I'm going to use an example tonight. I am not one who enjoys going to a store, picking out clothes, going into the fitting room, taking my clothes off, putting their clothes on, deciding if they fit well, and then putting my clothes back on, pulling my shoes back on, getting my belt back around my fat belly, and going out and having to say, well, no, these don't fit, so I got to look for something different. That whole process is not something that I enjoy. Now, when we go shopping, guess how Tommy shops? Well, I found these 38 pair of pants that I need to try on. 38. All right, well, I'll see you in a month. He goes, he tries them on, Martin, he's gone for an hour, he comes back, he says, well, these 3 fit, these 4 didn't, you know how it is. Me, I go, I look at the tag on the pants. I'm not going to say the numbers, so those of you sitting out there with bated breath waiting for me to give you my number, you ain't going to hear my numbers. I'm a svelte, no. I look at the numbers on the tag, and if they're what I wear, then by golly, I buy them. Now, if I get home and those pants don't fit me, I'd be pretty ignorant to get mad at the pants. Well, these stupid pants. No, you didn't do your due diligence as a shopper. You ain't got no right to be mad at the pants. The same thing is true of people who rush into relationship after relationship after relationship. The problem is how you shop. It's how you date. It's what you're looking for, what you're willing to act upon. You see the size on the tag and you act upon that. Tommy, on the other hand, no, I got to try the pants on. I got to look at them in the mirror. I got to see how they feel. That is what he goes through before he buys pants. Well, guess what? He generally don't come home with pants that don't fit. I have, on occasion, brought pants home that don't fit. Then I have to go through the whole routine of exchanging and going through all that mess, okay? So how we go about the process is very important, Martin. It's very important how we go about the process. Most people have these ridiculous, and I'm going to speak plain, so those of you online, put your seatbelt on because the preacher ain't in the mood to play games tonight. Most people are extremely unrealistic. Yeah. And they love to live in the land of la-la, in fairy tale land. I'm sleeping in my bed, and Prince Charming comes and kisses me, and I wake up, and we live happily ever after, and I'm a princess, and he's the king, and oh, it's just wonderful, and we ride off into the sunset on a white horse. I got news for you, honey. There's a reason those things are called fairy tales. All right? They're tales, and chances are they'll never happen to a fairy. Take my word for it, all right? That's not how the real world operates. That is a romanticized version of the story, okay? I know for myself, I went through years of my life, thinking that, the way it should happen. I look across the crowded room. I see a beautiful face. They look back at me. We both smile. Instantly, our eyes begin to glow as the love between us begins to grow. We begin to move across the room toward one another. And with each step, the passion grows. And I could go on and on and on. How many of us haven't, at some point in our lives, especially in our youth, had these sort of notions, right? And if it doesn't happen that way, then we don't pursue it. We only pursue those potential relationships where things start out hot, where things start out steamy, where there's this air of excitement. And, well, that's your problem, honey. Your problem ain't the pants, it's how you shop for pants. You wonder why you keep running into dogs? I'll tell you why you keep running into dogs. It has to do with how you shop. Now, I'm going to tell you, this is not right out of the Bible tonight. This is out of the mind and heart of a 52-year-old preacher who's lived a lot of life, done a lot of things. And I have some wisdom to share with people. And I've got news for you. The Word of God tells us, 1 Peter chapter 5 and verse 5, likewise, ye younger, submit yourselves unto the elder, yea, all of you be subject one to another, and be clothed with humility. For God resisteth the proud, and giveth grace to the humble. Humility is something you don't usually find in the young. Younger people, no, they know better than us older folks. I know better than he does. I'm going to tell you, I thank God I grew up in church. And I thank God I grew up being taught to honor those who were elders, those who were older than myself. I thank God that that principle was instilled in me. Because when the elders in the church, and by elder, I simply mean the older members of the church, would offer me counsel and offer me advice, I already had it in my mind that it was to my advantage to listen. Because I was raised to honor my elders, to humble myself. Just because you think you know better doesn't mean you know better. People who've lived through life, honey, have something to say. And only a pure D, not so bright person ignores what they're saying. Am I telling the truth? Anybody that's lived more than 40 or 50 years in this life has looked back and said, boy, do I remember the words this person said to me. Do I remember the words that person? Do I remember my mother telling me this? Do I remember my father telling me that? Do I remember grandma or grandpa or uncle or so-and-so? Or do I remember brother so-and-so in the church giving me some advice? And we might not have appreciated it then, but the older we've grown, the more we look back and realize they were right on the money. I look back at things that my Uncle Eddie, Tommy knows my Uncle Eddie. I look back at things my Uncle Eddie said decades ago, and I think to myself, boy, he was so on the money. Now, my Uncle Eddie wasn't in church. He's not a Christian. He's not serving the Lord. But I'll tell you, he said some things that stuck with me over the years that I have seen proved to be absolutely right time and again. One thing he said, and I know some Christians are going to gag on their dentures when I say this, so hold your top plate, Lisa. My Uncle Eddie used to say when he was in the Navy, he said the easiest way to find a good one-night stand was to find a woman that complained. He said, you find a woman who does nothing but gripe and complain about relationships, love, her family, where she lives, her job. He said she's an easy mark. He said complainers are an easy mark. You want to know a little secret? I learned the hard way that he was right. Not because I went out searching for complainers, but because I spent half my life being one. When I came out, I constantly would get disgusted with the people who would use me and mistreat me, and they would just use me for what they could get out of me and then dump me, And so what I did every time I met somebody, I was griping about, hello now, How many of us know people that do this very thing? Every time you talk to them, every time you hear them talk, all they gripe about is, well, you know, men are dogs and blah, 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 blah. I got news for you, honey. When you do that, you are putting up a billboard saying, I'm an easy target. Because wolves see you as the weakest member of the flock. They say, oh, here's somebody, all I got to do is be sweet and say the right words. Oh, yeah, your ex-boyfriend was a dog. What a pig he was. Why, that's terrible that I would never treat you that way. Of course you wouldn't, because tomorrow morning you'll be gone and I'll never see you again. So of course you wouldn't treat me that way. But you see, little things, little words I heard over the years from older people, I've learned through experience that they knew what they were talking about. Well, I want to tell you today, you want to be successful in relationships, you got to learn to shop right. You got to learn to go into the process with the right mindset, with the right game plan, and follow it through. Don't try to take shortcuts. Follow it through. Let me tell you something. This is not something I've known since I was 18 years old. No, this is something I've learned over the years that I've put together. Okay? There ought to be a process, Martin, that we go through before we ever get up in front of the preacher in the altar and make a commitment to somebody for the rest of our lives.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes, there should.
There ought to be a process. I'm going to tell you what the process is for most LGBT people. Hi, how are you? Let's go to bed tomorrow. Hey, want to rent a U-Haul? Sure. That's the process. I got news for you. It's not a whole lot different for a lot of people in the straight community either. It's the same foolishness. Again, we tend to see passion and attraction as being this romanticized, powerful force that just overwhelms us and overtakes us. Well, I got news for you. It'll also betray you every single time. No, there's a process that I've developed in my teaching over the years, and that process is as follows. You have attraction. You're not going to be interested in somebody you're not attracted to at some level. You have to be attracted to them. Now, that doesn't even necessarily mean you're physically attracted to them. I've told you before, I've met people that physically I was not necessarily wild about them, but when they spoke and when they talked, there was something about the way they carried themselves and the way they acted that kind of drew me in, and I found myself attracted to that person. So when I say attraction, it doesn't mean that there has to necessarily be a physical attraction, but just some general attraction. Something attracts you to another person. Following attraction, you have introduction, because you're not ever going to have a relationship with anybody that you don't talk to. So you have to somehow, some way introduce yourself and make yourself known to this person. Then, attraction and introduction should be followed by, oh, sex! Sex, that's it! No. that I know heterosexual and otherwise, that'd be the first thing they'd say, all right? No. Dating. Here's the problem with dating. Most people think they know what dating is. Most people think they know how to date, and they don't. You don't know what dating is to begin with, and certainly if you don't know what it is, you certainly don't know how to do it, and do it right. Dating, we're going to go into dating. That's going to be the first big topic that we're going to hit in this next series, so in this next portion of our series. But I'm trying to lay some groundwork tonight. Following dating, you have courtship. Following courtship, you have engagement. Following engagement, you have marriage. So you have attraction, introduction, dating, courtship, engagement, and 6 is marriage. How many people you know have gone through a process that looks anything like that? How many people do you know have ever gone? You know, it amazes me. George and Barbara Bush met when she was, I read it today, she was 15, I believe it said, and he was 17. And they met at some sort of a dance of some kind. They married 3 years later. She was 18 and he was 20 or so. Okay? Isn't that funny? They were teenagers when they met. But they were together about a year and they became engaged. Well, they were engaged for 2 years before they married. I got a little secret. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with finding someone that you're genuinely interested in and spending 2 or 3 years dating them. What is dating? Dating, first of all, is an opportunity for discovery. That's where you get to know the person. It is non-committal. Oh, Pastor, are you saying that you could date more than one person? And I'm sure, of course you can. You're not supposed to say that. Why? The minute you meet somebody, you're supposed to immediately be monogamous. And you're immediately supposed to be committed to them. No, that's the mistake you've been making over and over and over again. I'm going to tell you a little secret about dating. Dating is spending time with someone non-committal, but giving them an opportunity to get to know you, you getting an opportunity to get to know them. There are advantages. Oh, people are just going to die. I can already hear, I hear some of y'all out there just grinding your dentures now. But there are advantages even to spending time dating more than one person at one time. Advantages? Why, no, there are no advantages. Why, I could lose that person. Honey, first of all, you don't even know if that's a person you want to keep yet. You're trying to keep somebody, you don't even know if they're worth keeping. No! There are advantages to dating and being non-committal. And I'm not saying go out, and first of all, I better say this or else we're going to have a lot of misunderstanding. When I say dating, I am not talking about making woo-woo with everybody you fall, into eye contact with. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying as far as spending time, going to a movie with this one, there are advantages to dating, being non-committal. And to spending time with more than one person. I'm not saying some people, that's just too darn complicated for them and they can't handle it. But, if somebody else says to you, well, gee, could I meet you for coffee one day? Would you have dinner with me? And just because you're having dinner with this guy on Thursday doesn't mean you can't have dinner with this one on another night. Oh, Pastor, I can't believe you're saying these things. Folks, I'm going to tell you, I'm trying to be so practical that if you'll listen to me, it'll blow your mind. There are advantages to this. I've learned from experience. I have learned to appreciate one person that I was dating more and more and more by being able to compare them with the other people that I was meeting. Oh my goodness. Why, you're so worried about losing that relationship. Sweetheart, You meet, if I have an opportunity to spend time with 3 people in a month, let's say, and 2 of those people, I'm seeing things and I'm hearing things that I'm just not real crazy about and I'm just not real wild about. But then I think, well, this other person that I really like, boy, I'll tell you, they're just shining brighter and brighter and brighter by comparison. But do you know what the biggest enemy of good relationships is? Insecurity.
Yes.
I started talking about it last week. People think that you've got to nail it down as fast as you can. I gotta get that person into a commitment as fast as I can. Sweetie, I got news for you. Commitments are broken every day. Commitments are broken every day. Getting somebody into a vocalized commitment, there's no guarantee that they're going to follow through on that commitment, okay? Let's just be practical. No, you do not need to meet somebody. Well, I like him so much. I think he's so wonderful. I don't want to take a chance on losing him. Well, first of all, part of your problem is you don't think you're all that great a catch. You're insecure. So you're afraid if that person were to compare you with anybody else, hello now, that they're going to think everybody else on the planet is better than you. How do I know? Been there, done it. Okay? Been there, done it, kids. I started out my life dating, especially after 89 when I came out, as insecure as anybody. And I'm going to tell you, it made me nothing but an overgrown nuisance and a pain in the neck to everybody I tried to date. Because I was so stinking insecure, it wasn't even funny. And my insecurity was based on my self-loathing. It was based on the fact that I did not see myself in the best possible light. So therefore, the idea is, well, let's nail it down as fast as we can, because then as my warts begin to appear and as my tumors begin to appear, they're going to have to love me because they made that commitment to love me. Folks, you know as well as I do, I'm telling the truth. This is the mindset. This is the way a lot of people think. I want to tell you something. The warts and the tumors that appear, you should have them appearing while you're dating. You should go into a relationship already predisposed and pre-exposed to your potential partner's warts, to their potential partner's failings, to your potential partner's weaknesses. If you go into a relationship already aware of these things, Martin, you are way ahead of the game. If you make a commitment prematurely and then find these things later, all of a sudden you're finding, doggone it, maybe this isn't somebody I should have made a commitment to begin with. And if you think locking somebody into a commitment is going to prevent them from deciding when your warts and your tumors and your faults and your weaknesses appear, that they don't want to be bothered with you and they're going to leave, you're out of your mind. It is going to happen, and that's why you're going to keep going through relationship after relationship after relationship. But part of the way to avoid a lot of hurt early in the process is to date. Non-committal. See, I don't care if somebody I'm dating don't want to see me anymore. Because I'm not committed to them. They're not committed to me. We're just exposing ourselves to one another. We're trying to get to know one another. We're learning about one another. If there's anything there worth pursuing, then the dating process will continue. If the dating process ends, guess what? You sure enough didn't want to be prematurely jumping into something with that person, because then it still would have ended. But only then it would have hurt a whole lot more because you'd have had a whole lot more invested. Dating is one of the most important aspects of pursuing a relationship. I cannot tell you how important dating is, folks. When I met Tommy, I told him, I said, I don't believe in rushing into living together and moving in together and all that kind of stuff. I said, no. And many times I even said to you, I said, we're dating. I did, early in our relationship. Part of that is for my own mental health. I have to keep everything compartmentalized. You know what I'm saying? We had some really tough issues early in our relationship that caused a lot of, muddy waters and really troubled the seas a bit. And I wasn't sure, Lisa, I can honestly say, I wasn't sure where our relationship was going to go, if it was going to be anything or not. But I have to compartmentalize things. I have to have things psychologically in a certain place. Because if I don't, then, and if I jump ahead too far, and if we wind up living together and moving in together too soon and all that stuff, oh, brother, you can make a mess. Been there, done it, folks. I'm telling you, I'm not talking stuff that I haven't lived. I met somebody in New York City years ago, and I was doing pretty well for myself, and I met somebody that I was just crazy about. I just was nuts over this person. And we started dating, hanging out, getting together, going out, and it was fun. All of a sudden, this person gets notice that they're being evicted from their apartment. It turns out he don't like to pay his bills. So what do? The smart thing, of course. Sayonara. I'd rather have somebody who knows how to pay their bills and keep a roof over their head. No, I don't do that. We've known each other a whole, 2 weeks by now? I said, well, why don't we get a place together? We did. 2 years later, well, you were always more into this relationship than I was. You were always more committed to this thing than I was. And poof, off they go. And I was devastated because I was truly crazy about that person. I really was crazy about him. But I didn't follow the process, Martin. I should have followed the process. If you keep your head in the game, you'll protect your heart. You hear me? But don't kid yourself into thinking that if you put your head in the game, and I'm talking to you guys on Facebook right now, and those of you watching on the internet as well, if you keep your head in the game, do not think for a moment that you will not be able to find the love of your life, that you will not be able to find happiness, that you will not be able to find fulfillment. Yes, you can, right, booby? If you keep your head in the game, no, you just take things more carefully. You just take things more slowly. You just put everything in the right perspective. You keep everything in the right order. And then when it all comes together and it all comes to fruition, I want to tell you something. You're going to have something that can survive the storms. You're going to have something that is substantive and that is real. You're not going to be going through so-called relationship after relationship after relationship. That person that I had jumped into getting an apartment with after a couple weeks, after 2 years, that person left me feeling so horrible about myself at the end of 2 years. I never, ever felt so bad about myself as I did when that relationship ended. I can't even tell you. But I thank God for it because it finally taught me a lesson, Martin. I finally realized after that situation, never again am I going to let stupidity reign. Never again am I going to let my emotions get the best of me and I'm just going to rush into things. After that, I dated people. And I made it known to them that I was dating them. And I did not let anybody move in with me. I did not move in with anybody. I'm telling you, all of a sudden, I began to change. You know, Einstein, I believe, is the one who said that the definition of insanity is doing things the same way over and over again and expecting a different result. Okay? No, you can't do things the same way over and over again and expect things to work out differently. No, you got to change the way you do things if you want to get a different result. And so I changed the way I was doing things. And do you know what happened, Martin? I wound up dating somebody that I thought quite a lot of and was really, really into and really interested in. And we dated for about 5 or 6 months. And there were other people that I met, you know, that I had coffee with or whatever, and by comparison, I liked this person better by far than these other people. You know, nobody come along that appealed to me more. If anything, they helped me to become more, you know, enchanted by this individual. But after being dating for about 5 or 6 months, they lived where they lived. I lived where I lived. All of a sudden, I found out that this person was doing drugs again. See, when I met him, it was, I quit doing all this and I quit. And then all of a sudden, I found out that this person was doing drugs again. And I said, I like you very much. I really do. But that is something I refuse to have in my life. I will not. Well, if you loved me, you'd help me. But no, honey. No. The only person who can help you is you. Don't you dare try to put your issues on my doorstep.
That's right. That's
no.
Right.
You want something good in your life, and this is true for me, and this is true for you. If you want something good in your life, then, honey, you're the one responsible for making yourself capable of having that.
Yes.
Don't give me this foolishness. If you want somebody like me in your life, because I finally got to the place where I had a little bit of respect for myself and had a little value for myself. Say, now, if you want somebody like me who is very commitment-oriented, who is very relationship-oriented, who is very family-oriented, if you want somebody like me in your life, then, sweetheart, you better know how to get clean and stay clean. Because people like me, I'm not bringing that into my life. I am not going to have the uncertainty. I'm not going to have stuff disappeared from my house to pay for drugs. I'm not going to have money being taken out of my wallet to pay for drugs. I'm not going to be having you showing up at a family event high as a kite. You know what I'm saying? No. I'm not going to have that in my life. I had certain things, Lisa, that I had determined were not workable in my life. And I never compromised that. Now, was I sad? Was I heartsick? Yeah, because I really did care about this person. But I finally grew to the place where I learned in my life that you've got to keep your head in the game. You've got to keep your head in the game. You cannot foolishly think. Because, honey, I got news for you. What you think you may be facing and the reality of what you may be facing may be miles apart. You may think, I can help him. I could help him. If that had been me, I could have helped him. You don't know what a mess that would have turned into. You don't know what a mess. There were other people Martin and I dated, and over the course of time, I found them to be so jealous. Have you ever met anybody who was so jealous? I mean, ridiculously so. I smile at everybody. Tommy can tell you, I smile at everybody. And I'm a terrible flirt by nature. Now look at me. I'm old, I'm fat. The only thing I'm not is toothless. I flirt with female waitresses. I flirt with everybody. You know, not in a sexual way, but, you know, just playfully. You know, I'll tell the young girl, oh, honey, if I were 30 years younger and 100 pounds lighter and about, you know, I'd chase you like you ain't never been chased, you know, and they get a chuckle out of it. And, you know, I'm harmless. But I do that on occasion, right? I've met people who, if I so much as looked at somebody and smiled at them, oh my God, there was hell to pay. Oh boy, next thing you know, there was a big fight going on. Because well, you smiled at that person. And I said, well, of course I smiled at that person. If you and I meet eyes, I'm going to smile at you. I don't care if you're pretty. I don't care if you're ugly. I don't care if you're pretty ugly. I'm going to smile at you. That's just how I do. That is my natural response to meeting eyes with people. I do it all the time. You know what I'm saying? But this person literally would just go haywire if I so much as smiled at somebody. I'm not going to have that in my life. I am not going to have that foolishness in my life. I am not going to spend all my time defending myself when it comes to harmless behavior. I'm not going to do it. It's obscene. If you can't trust the person you're with, and if the person you're with can't trust you, you don't belong together.
That's right.
It's that simple. Well, but you don't understand. Oh, honey, I'm 52 going on 53. Trust me, I understand.
Yes.
I do understand. Tommy and I, if he needs to go to the store or go to the gym or do something, I don't think a thing in the world about him saying to me, well, I'm going to go to the gym. I have dated people I couldn't do that with. You know? Oh, no, if you tried to say, well, I need to go to the store, by God, they either had to go with you or you couldn't go. You know, ridiculous stuff. Folks, if you can't trust the person you're with, you shouldn't be with them. Tommy and I, you know, that's one aspect of our relationship that I love. And honestly, I'm going to tell you, years ago in my youth and in experience and in my insecurity, I couldn't have done it either back in the day. But now I've grown up, I've matured, and I've learned we don't have to be attached at the hip. We don't have to breathe out of the same lung. We don't have to talk out of the same mouth. Okay? Bless her heart, I hope my mother isn't embarrassed by me saying this, but she was in a marriage with a fella, and every time she left the room, if he wasn't attached to her at the hip, I could not have a private conversation, literally, with my own mother because my stepfather had to be there every single time. It was absurd. So there are things that I learned, Lisa, that no, I won't have this. And so, in the process of dating, I learned there is nothing wrong with saying, you know what, I think you're a terrific person. Now, you may not say this, you may not necessarily verbalize this, but this may be what's going on in your head. But there are things in you, about you, that I do not want in a relationship. Now, one of my best friends in the world just died recently. His name was Jose. I love Jose. He and I were friends literally for about 25 years. We met, and originally we dated. But there were things that honestly, till the day he died, there were things about Jose that just would not work with me in terms of a relationship. But it didn't stop me from being able to remain his friend. See, I can be your friend and you can be certain ways or do certain things. And I'm fine being your friend, but being a friend and being a romantic interest are two different things. We spent 2.5 decades at least being the best of friends. For many years, my grandmother thought we were in a relationship. She said, "Are you sure? Are you sure?" I said, "Grandma, I'm absolutely sure. Trust me." Because every time she saw me, this was during the years that I was dating, and all that. And whenever I wanted to do something, if I was by myself, I'd say, "Hey, Jose, you want to go with me?" Because instead of doing it by myself, he was my good friend. He'd go. We spent so much time together, there was nothing at all going on. When I met Tommy, he met Jose because Jose was my best friend. I told Tommy how I met Jose. I'm going to tell you a little secret, folks. And I'm being honest, I'm not joking. I have several friends in my life today that I have had for many, many years that originally I dated. Yep. You know why? Because when you grow up, you learn that if you're dating, see, if you rush in and you get too involved right off the starting line, then when you break up, it's bound to be negative and hurtful and, all of this. But if you approach the process right and you date, then you're able at some point to say, in dating you, I really enjoy spending time with you. And I think we can be friends, but I really don't think a romantic long-term relationship is in the works. So, how about we be friends? Now, there are people out there saying, "Well, I can't do that with my ex." No, because you rushed into things and you got yourself this high in the water, but way too fast, and and everything turned to pot. Of course, you can't do it with your ex, but if you approach the process like you should, you can.
Right.
You can. Most of us in this room are a little bit older, and you all know what I'm talking about, don't you?
Amen.
You can do it, can't you? You see, that's the problem with youth and inexperience, and I'm not picking on young people, but they don't understand if you keep your head in the game, if you approach things from the right perspective, if you go through the process, you will be able at times to say to somebody that you may have at one time looked at it romantically. But then, in the process of dating, you say, "Well, no, I don't quite see it." And you say, "Hey, let's be friends." And I've got several people that I don't even know if I could count them, to be honest. I dated a lot. I used to be cute and thin, folks, okay? But are you understanding what I'm saying? Is this good wisdom tonight? Is there any good, solid advice in here that I'm offering?
Absolutely.
All right, amen. I'm going to try next week to move into the next phase. We talked about it, dating, courtship, engagement, marriage. But we're going to end tonight because it's been about an hour. And I don't want to keep us too long and bore you to death. But I hope people understand tonight. Folks, this is good wisdom that I'm trying to offer you. It really is. There's a lot of good wisdom here. And if you can learn to take this advice, if you can learn to humble yourself, what does that mean? It means don't think you know all the answers. Don't dismiss what the older guy says. Because after all, you know better. If you know better, then how come you're on your 14th relationship this month or this year? If you know better, then how come every time I look at your Facebook, your relationship status is changing as I look at it? How come if the way you do things works, then how come I'm constantly seeing it on your page? I hate him, I hate him, I hate him. I'll kill that no good son of a gun. And the next minute, I love him, I love him, I love him. Nobody's ever been so wonderful to me. And you're talking about the same person. Okay? It's insanity to keep doing things the same way and expect a different result. if you'll hear what I'm trying to offer you tonight, and in this, as we continue this study, if you'll listen to what I'm trying to help you understand, folks, I promise you, you will find that you get a much better result. And in the end, you will find what you're looking for. Because there is somebody out there for everybody. Say, well, I'm too broken. I'm messed up. That's okay. I got news for you. I know some pretty broken people. I know some pretty messed up people. And yet they still have found somebody. Okay? Not everybody can necessarily deal with your idiosyncrasies and your, but there's somebody out there for everybody. And the more time you spend on the wrong people, you're taken away from the time you could be spending with the right person. And if there's anything I've learned over the years, you can be so involved with the wrong person that 18 right people might walk right past you. And you're all tied up with this character. And in the meantime, you've got others who could have been beneficial to you, who could have been positive in your life, who could have brought you something so much better, and you didn't even look at it because you went and made yourself a premature commitment and a premature, engagement with this other person. Learn to date. It's important to date. Keep it compartmentalized in your mind. I'm at that stage where we're dating. You live where you live. I live where I live. We spend time together. We enjoy one another's company, but we're dating. And there is no time frame on dating. There is absolutely no time frame. I have a cousin, and I promise I'll shut up as soon as I say this. I have a cousin who was dating this woman for, oh my goodness, 10 or 12 years. Finally, after all those years, he succumbed to, well, why aren't y'all married by now? Good grief, how can you date somebody for that many years? Well, they enjoyed each other's company. They enjoyed spending time together. They enjoyed whatever they did. He wasn't in church at the time, so I'm sure they did plenty. And, so finally he, asked her to marry him. They became engaged. They got married shortly thereafter. Their marriage didn't last a year. Didn't last a year. You know why? Because it's how we shop for pants. It was how we shop for pants. What was he looking for in the dating process? Was he looking for somebody that he could spend the rest of his life with? Is that what you're looking for when you date? Someone you can spend the rest of your life with, somebody who builds you up rather than tears you down, somebody who can be supportive of you when you're going through difficult times, somebody that you can buttress when they're going through difficult times. What are you looking for? What are the parameters of what you will or will not accept? See, my cousin, that wasn't how he was looking at things. That isn't how, if he'd have been looking at things that way, he might have realized at some point. And he said this himself to me. He said, I would have realized, no, I really don't want to spend the rest of my life with this woman. You see? But because of the way he was looking at the whole dating, process, that determined how he went into his marriage. And it failed within a year. Now, I can tell you, his second wife that he met was a Christian girl. And they played, quote, by the rules. He fell crazy in love with that girl. They dated for a good while, became engaged, got married, had 2 kids. He was an incredible father. He got in church, began to serve the Lord. He was an incredible father, a marvelous husband. And he passed away a couple of years ago with cancer. That man died having been with the second wife for like 25, 30 years and just had a marvelous marriage. So trust me when I tell you, how you shop for clothes determines on whether you get the right fit. Amen. Do you understand me? Would you stand with me tonight?